Hello, and welcome to another episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded, a podcast about business immigration and global mobility. I'm Eric, and joining me today, as always, is my co host, Finn. We're recording this on August 8th, and Finn, how's it going?
Not too bad, Eric. Very stormy here in Maine today. So just hanging out inside and a good day for podcasting. How are you doing?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, start of a new month. You guys are getting some pretty bad storms up there, right? Isn't like the entire East Coast under like a severe storm watch or something?
Yeah, I think they just throw on those labels for clicks, but yeah, I mean, it's a storm. It's
Yeah,
definitely a storm.
definitely, definitely. Hey, well, Finn, look, we got to catch up on a couple of immigration news items from the last few weeks before we hop into today's episode. But before we hop into those news alerts, as always, just want to remind everyone that if you are not currently subscribed on YouTube or following us on Apple or Spotify, definitely do so. Helps keep the show growing so we can keep releasing great content and conversations with industry professionals who specialize in immigration and and global mobility. Definitely want to keep those conversations coming for everyone. So give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. But Finn, on the topic of immigration news, a couple of big items that I wanted to quickly bring up with you. First and foremost, at the end of July, USCIS announced a second H-1B cap lottery. Uh, People were a little bit unsure if USCIS was going to do this move, but they did, and then they conducted that lottery. Um, Finn, what insights do you have as to why USCIS decided to move forward with the second lottery? And did this second lottery tell us anything else?
I think it's too early to tell. I mean, we know if we go back a couple of months, we remember the big news. USCIS released a couple of weeks after the initial cap lottery some information on how kind of an unbelievable number of registrations were duplicate registrations, and that was really mucking up the lottery system quite a bit. So it's no surprise that USCIS was forced to do this second lottery to fill the available number of slots. That said, despite the duplicate registrations, in the H-1B cap this year, there's demand still far outstrips supply. There's still far more individuals and companies that are trying to get an H-1B visa than there are visas available. So hopefully there's a handful. It's hard to know how many, a handful who are selected in the second lottery and have a chance to get their application adjudicated so they can get that covered H-1B.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, and we keep bringing up the demand far outpaces supply, and we're seeing in real time other countries like Canada swoop in and take advantage of that. With them launching their recent program, and you put together a reaction video with Daphne and Jim, which is available on our YouTube channel, and I think they filled the 10,000 slots within a matter of like 2 days. So you know, uh, yeah, a lot of movement there. And then Finn, there was another update regarding EAD cards that you came across on X.com or X, formerly known as Twitter. What do you
Yeah,
have for us there?
I guess the X label is sticking. It's been a couple weeks now, so we might
You
have
were
to.
you were saying they were going to change it, but man, I don't know about that one anymore.
Yeah, don't listen to my predictions. I guess on anything social media related. Um, no, the ombudsman office over at USCIS just put out a tweet yesterday that I thought was worth flagging to the audience. That USCIS has resolved EAD card production delays, and that EAD cards, from here on out, should now be produced and mailed to the approved applicant, the approved foreign national, within 1 to 2 weeks after an I-765 approval. So lot of you know a lot of nuance there. But for anyone who has applied for an EAD in the past few years, they may be familiar with the fact that getting that physical card so that you can actually go and work on the EAD can sometimes be a bit of a bit of a stressful process because there are delays with it actually getting mailed to you. So hopefully USCIS is true to their word, and anyone who applies here on out for an EAD card will get the actual physical card within 1 to 2 weeks of the approval of the application.
Nice. Appreciate that update, Finn. And then just quickly wrapping up our intro part here. Um, Finn, I've been seeing a steady stream of stories, and I'll leave it for our listeners to, just kind of determine their own thoughts on it. But I will say, there's been a steady stream of stories coming out of Florida, which, as we know, the state passed an immigration law and it went into effect on July 1st. And articles from Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NPR, seemingly weekly are talking about we're starting to see some of the effects of that law, where, one of the big ones, it requires employers, who employ 25 or more employees to use the E-Verify system, among other provisions. And, we're seeing, stories from construction managers, from business owners of, they're starting to lose workers. Farmers are losing workers. Construction sites are, they're having to delay projects and things of that sort. So we'll link a couple of those stories. Would be curious to hear if you have any thoughts on Florida's immigration law and kind of what these articles are discussing. Let us know your thoughts. Definitely curious to hear what everyone is thinking. And so with that, Finn, we're going to hop into our conversation with Helen Frew and François van Roosmalen. It was a lovely conversation with both these individuals. They're part of the Permits Foundation, which is an independent, not-for-profit organization that campaigns globally to improve work permit regulations, essentially so that partners of highly skilled international employees may directly access employment while in that host country. So great conversation coming up. Just a quick note though, however, I was having some computer problems, so I had to switch to a different device to record that conversation on my end. So my audio is not the best, so apologies in advance. But hope everyone enjoys that conversation, which is coming up right now.
And now I'd like to welcome Helen Frew and François van Roosmalen, to Immigration and Mobility Decoded. Helen and François, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. So excited to have you on.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Eric.
We're so excited to talk with you today. We've been, talking about having you on the show for a bit now. We have a mutual connection, Sophie King. She connected us, and just over our email exchanges, I could tell that this is going to be a very, very fun conversation about your organization and the work that both of you do. But before we hop into the heart of our conversation today, we always like to start each episode just getting to know our guests. And so, Helen, how are things going? And you and François are both based in the Netherlands. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Eric. Well, thanks. It's lovely to be here. Françoise and I are very happy to be speaking with you and to your audience. And you're right. Yeah, we're calling in today from the Netherlands. So it's been very warm here of late, bearing in mind we don't have the aircon like you guys, so we are slightly relieved that the temperature here has now dropped a little. But yeah, Permits Foundation, we're a Netherlands-based organisation. We're founded in The Hague, but we are an international organisation, so our work is global. And just looking forward to telling you about our work around the world.
Awesome. Yeah, we were chatting before we started recording, and I've never been to the Netherlands. It's definitely on my bucket list. And, on the show, my co-host Finn and I, we have a running joke of, the weather takes up a big portion of our conversations. And so I'm also very jealous that of your current weather situation right now. Over here, I'm based in Chicago, and it is, I'm not sure if there's the Canadian wildfires, and so a bunch of that smoke is kind of like settling over parts of the Midwest, including Chicago. So like the last couple of days that we've had some very bad air quality, and it's just smelled like a giant campfire everywhere you go.
Wow, no, I
Yeah.
can't imagine. So you have to stay indoors.
Yes, yes. So that's the recommendation. Obviously people are still going to baseball games and things of that sort. But yeah, it's just wild, the haziness that's out there. Spring into summer, Helen and Françoise. I guess Françoise, I'll start with you. Any summer travel plans coming up, or any recent trips that you've been on?
Well, I actually just returned from a trip to Finland, to Helsinki, Eric. My first visit there, really enjoyed it. I don't know if you've been to Finland. It's an easy place to get around, Helsinki. Did a lot of sightseeing and some great hikes. We are keen hikers. We went to a national park. It's called Nuisko. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but that's an hour away from Helsinki. And of course, there is a famous fortress, which is a UNESCO heritage site. So we really enjoyed Helsinki, and I can warmly recommend it to everyone. That's for now. No further plans yet, but I'm sure they will emerge in the coming weeks.
That's awesome, François. I have never been to Helsinki, but similarly, I've heard a lot of awesome things about it. How did you decide to visit there?
Oh, well, my husband had been there many, many years ago, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, and we were looking for a place to go, and we like hiking. We didn't want to go to Switzerland. We've been hiking there a lot. So this was something new. And it's 2 hours flight from Amsterdam, so not too far away, same time zone, good weather, not too warm, and good hiking parks.
Amazing, amazing. Helen, how about you? Any recent trips or any summer trips coming up?
Well, you might have guessed by my accent that I'm not Dutch. I'm actually Scottish. So I for sure will be returning to Scotland this summer to see the family. I don't know if you know Scotland. I'm from the east coast near St Andrews, the home of golf, as it's known. So it's my neck of the woods. Yeah, so for me too, it's just a short hop from Amsterdam there over to Edinburgh.
Nice, nice. We're talking about so many locations worldwide, and I feel like a stereotypical American, and that I haven't visited these awesome spots. But I do know Scotland because it is obvious. It is, as I'm sure you know, Helen. It is a very popular filming spot for a lot of television shows and movies. I believe. I might need to double check. I feel like I should know this because I'm such a huge fan, but I'm pretty sure Game of Thrones did a lot of their filming in Scotland.
I think Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland as well. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a very popular destination. So, and I know they do a bunch of tours to see some of the spots, whether it's for Game of Thrones or other big name shows and movies. So you could just kind of see those locations that we would be watching on our TV screens.
So you should go, Eric, to New Zealand too, to look at where the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit was filmed.
Yes. I think that might be a possibility. I feel like the odds are going up. So my wife, she works for a giant hamburger corporation that we know, the Golden Arches. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing she might be going to Australia for work-related events, but I'll have to pay my way to go to join her. And I think we might be able to do Australia and New Zealand in the fall. So fingers crossed that happens.
Hope so.
Yes. All right. So thank you both for sharing some of your travel details. Obviously, since the show is focused on, global mobility and immigration, I think it's always fun to just talk about, upcoming travel and trips and whatnot. And then before we hop into just talking a little bit more about Permis Foundation, Helen and Françoise, I just want to say that I'm very jealous of your areas, your country's biking network, and just the different modes of transportation and everything that you have. There are a couple of YouTube channels that I follow that have to do with like I would say like city planning or just looking at like how people get from A to B, and obviously biking is a very popular in the Netherlands, and the infrastructure supports it more so than over here in the States. I mean, some cities, some areas have pretty good biking infrastructure, but it definitely lacks compared to where both of you are.
Yeah, in fact, I would recommend, I don't know if you follow the News from the Cycle Path, which is a BBC news reporter going around doing news items, but she does it while she's cycling. I recommend it. It's really great.
I'll have to check her out. I actually have not heard of her, so yeah, thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah.
So Helen and Françoise, I want to talk a little bit more about getting to know the Permits Foundation. So Helen, can you tell us more about the Permits Foundation and the work that your organization does?
Yeah, sure. So Permits Foundation is a not-for-profit corporate initiative, and we are supported by over 40 major international sponsor companies and other organizations. And what we do is we carry out advocacy at government level worldwide so that the partners of international employees can directly access employment in the host country. And so the focus is on direct work access for partners of highly skilled international employees. And when we say direct access, what we mean is that once the dependent status is recognised in the host country, the spouse or partner can work for any employer or ideally to be able to carry out self-employment, no extra hurdles, no separate work permissions, or tied to a specific employer. And why do we do this? Well, increasingly dual careers, they're on the increase. The more often you see in the destination countries, the cost of living is high. Increasingly, the expectation is that both members of the couple can continue to work. And the thing is, they want to know this is possible before the move takes place. So what we see from companies is increasingly they find that they can't move their top talent to a country where there isn't this assured access to work for the partner. And then they find that assignments are refused or cut short. But where families can work, they find that the employee experience is far better. They can better integrate. The country is seen as a more attractive business destination. So it's an issue. It's about talent attraction and retention, but it's also about diversity and inclusion. So since we were founded about, I think it's 20 years ago, over 30 countries have legislated to enable dual careers in this way. And as far as we know, we're the only organisation that's advocating solely on this quite specific issue. But we also work through a very collaborative approach with other like-minded organisations and companies. It's so great that we can be here to speak with you today about our work. And we make representations to government, written and in person, just to keep that trend moving in the right direction. And then just finally, our work is evidence-based. So we carry out surveys to share the latest data with policymakers, with our network, and we work in the countries that matter most to our network of international employers and their employees.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Helen. You mentioned that, employers, if they're looking to send an employee on an overseas or on an assignment, and maybe that country doesn't have the infrastructure in place to support a partner working, when would you say that you started to see that change? Like, has it always? What was this like back maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago? Was a partner working at the forefront of the employee and the employer?
No, the real changes only took place in the last 20 years, I'd say. I mean, Françoise will tell you about what happened over the history, but I think there were some big moments. The US actually was one of the first to allow work access. You would think, but it was one of the first, although it was employment authorization documents. It wasn't completely direct. And then there were some massive steps along the way with the EU directives allowing sort of many EU member states. That was from like 2010. that was a real game changer as well. And then in between times, we've just had lots of other countries sort of, I'll talk about it later, but lots of other countries sort of adding in there as well into the mix. But yeah, I mean, I think I would say it's been in the last 20 years that we've seen the big changes.
Got it. And Francois, are you any notable clients that you are able to share that you've worked with?
Yeah, well, for sure. We have the support of a large group of international organizations, both in the private and public sector, Eric, about 40 plus, we call them sponsors. They are listed on our website, but you should think of the energy sector, the automotive industry, the pharmaceutical sector, IT, service providers and consultants. And we have even the UN Secretariat supporting us. And these, we call them sponsors. They support us financially with a yearly donation and with some additional resources to help us achieve our goals. Some sponsors want to be more actively involved. We leave it to the sponsor, to the company, whether they want to, apart from giving a financial donation, be more actively working with us. You should think of participating in our country networks, in the countries where we advocate. Contribute content to our world map, and Helen will speak about it later in more detail. Writing letters of support for work. So all in all, I can say that we have a very loyal support group and that have stayed loyal and supportive of our work almost since startup.
Awesome. It sounds like you guys cover a wide range of industries and work with companies and across all those industries. So that's really awesome. Really awesome to hear.
Yes,
good.
Yes, they recognize the importance of the work for their employees and the dual career couples.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And Francois, as Helen mentioned a couple minutes ago, the Permits Foundation, you guys have been around since 2001. How has your organization grown since then?
We were founded, actually, to be correct, in June 2001 in the Netherlands. So almost 23 years ago.
Yeah.
And we celebrated our 20th anniversary 2 years ago. So we've grown a lot since then. And I was going through our archive earlier this week, and I came across the minutes of the first inauguration board meeting. We started at the time with 15 sponsors, 7 board members, and 3 patrons. And since then, we've grown to more than 40 sponsors. We also have a far more global spread now. And I can say, I think I'm allowed to say that Permits Foundation is now well recognized within the global mobility community. And actually, if I go back to the history, the plan to set up the foundation initially grew among a group of HR professionals who came together and were discussing the challenges they faced regarding the move of their international staff due to dual careers and stringent work permit regulations for spouses and partners. They saw that it had an impact on employee mobility, assignment take-up, but also on diversity. And Eric, bear in mind that at the time, only the UK, Sweden, Australia, and if I'm correct, Venezuela, gave direct employment rights to spouses of expat workers. I mean, that's what they were called at the time. We now refer to international employees. And of course, within the EU countries, EU citizens could freely move. And I think Netherlands and Canada had special concessions in place. But in the rest of the world, the procedures could take several months. And these lengthy work permit processes represented a real deterrent both to dual career couples and to companies that might otherwise be prepared to employ partners. So they were thinking, what can we do to solve this problem, or what could we do to make it a little bit easier? And they realized that the financial compensation for loss of income, contribution to pension schemes wasn't going to solve the problem. Partners don't want a gap in their career. They have their own individual career aspirations. And by taking this sort of work permit hurdle away, you take away a major obstacle. Because partners still face challenges. I mean, and I can talk about it later a little bit more, but finding a job in an unfamiliar location, maybe language barriers, but at least they have the certainty pre-move that they can work, something that Helen also underpinned in the beginning. And I think it's good to note also that accompanying partners should, in our view, really be seen as accompanying talent. The majority of partners, about 88%, according to our latest survey, and again, we will talk about the survey later too, hold a bachelor degree or higher and have working experience in a broad range of sector. So a lot of talent is wasted. And I think, sadly, that the majority of partners are still mainly women, though we have seen over the last 20 years a slight shift there. And if I go also back to what really the idea, how came this idea of trying to influence work permit legislation? This group of HR professionals looked at the diplomatic world. Governments at the time were aware of dual career challenges and the need to address this problem for the partners of their own employees in the diplomatic community. And they addressed this issue where possible through bilateral agreements or MOUs. However, this model would not work for international companies as they have a very diverse international workforce and many nationalities. But a seed was planted, and having seen how the diplomats were trying to solve it, Purpose Foundation was launched in 2001.
Thank you so much, Françoise, for sharing the history of the Permits Foundation. And something that you said, I think, really resonated with me, and I think will resonate with a lot of our listeners and just anyone else, is you said that partners are the same top tier talent and they shouldn't be wasted. And I completely agree. And you highlighted how a lot of partners have that education level where they are able to work in and secure good paying jobs and jobs that are great. And I think it makes sense and agree with Permits Foundation advocating for them and helping to secure that work authorization for partners. Because if I look at it from my personal perspective, and if I were in their shoes and my partner was offered a job elsewhere abroad and I wasn't, it'd be a kind of a weird conversation to have, or like how would we move forward with that if there's only one person is working, and what does the other person do? And I know we're not going to focus too much on the economics of it or the economies of the world, but I think here in the States, and I know in the UK, and I'm sure elsewhere, but we're still seeing the post-pandemic effects, high inflation, which affects prices of everyday items such as groceries, clothing, and if it can put a burden on a household's finances if there's only one source of income.
Oh, for sure, and we've seen that. That came out of our survey too. That the need for dual income is becoming bigger because of the cost of living. If you are, for example, based, your host country is Singapore, look at the cost of living. and the renting costs. So that's going to be a challenge. And as you say, Eric, I've lived abroad for 18 years. I've lived in Southeast Asia and more recently in Kazakhstan, Switzerland, and even China. And I've witnessed from nearby the effect of a partner not being able to work. I've seen marriages even breaking down or assignments cut short, split marriages. So this has really a wide impact on many, many things.
Definitely. So, Helen, what countries does the Permits Foundation operate in? And the second part of that question, what countries can accompanying partners get a work permit in?
Well, as mentioned, we're international, so we operate globally, but we operate based on the priority destinations that are relayed to us by our sponsors and our wider network, and also where opportunities arise to carry out advocacy. And I think this pretty much mirrors the top global mobility destinations where major international organizations are moving their staff or hiring their staff or looking to attract talent. And then on your second point, where can accompanying partners get a work permit? I'd say, if I may, to your listeners while listening to this podcast, if you would like to just go to Permits Foundation website, permitsfoundation.com, there we have a world map feature, which is free to access. And this, I hope, is a really useful resource for your listeners because it shows at a glance not only where there is direct work access, as we've mentioned, or not, as the case may be, but also it shows, for example, where there is same-sex recognition, where non-married partners are able to access employment, recognise dependents, where partners can carry out self-employment. You can go there, you can look at countries, each country, you can see what the legislation is, what we as Permits Foundation are doing advocacy-wise or have done. And so that from that map, you can see there are over 30 countries that have at least one piece of legislation where there is direct work access incident to dependent status. But to summarise, I would say you would see work access being more easily available across the EU. So that's around 27 countries, 27 member states. And by the way, Permits Foundation did a lot of work there to get the legislation improved. The US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, quite a few countries actually in South America, so Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Chile. And actually, while talking about the map, I'll give a shout out to our team member, Jen Vosler, who is carrying out the legal research right now in collaboration with our network, because we want to ensure that the map is always up to date and it's a tool that's used by a lot of people. So I hope you don't mind, but I think it gives a really good summary of what the situation is, the green countries where the accompanying partners can work, and it's free to access.
Awesome. No, totally love the shout out for the map. And can you repeat the website again, just so and we can also put a link in the description, but that is permitsfoundation.com.
Yeah, and /world map, or you will just see it on the site there. You can get to it.
Awesome. So Françoise, I know just a couple of seconds ago we were talking about some of the challenges that partners and our families might face if the partner is unable to secure a work permit, or if a country doesn't offer one, particularly in this age of high inflation, high cost of living, and rent, and other necessities. But I'm curious to hear what challenges do partners face if they're working, and do you have any insights on how to navigate these challenges?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, indeed, Eric, that earlier, that partners may face challenges like language barriers. They have to build often their own professional network from scratch, adapt to a new work culture, to mention a few. But companies do offer a form of assistance within their mobility programs for partners to help them settle into the host country and tackle these challenges. But what we found, and again, I'm going back to a survey, is that the opportunity given to partners to communicate their employment and career concerns with their partner employers falls short. And I think that is something that is important to note. And I want to quote some data here from the survey. We did a survey back in 2022. The survey was aimed, one section was aimed towards HR, global mobility professionals, and a separate section for the partners of highly skilled employees. And on this topic, more than 60% of global mobility professionals realized that dual careers and partner issues were becoming more important to their organizations. So it had an impact on their organizations. But only 20% of partners said that they had been given an opportunity to communicate their concern about employment and career with their partner's organization. And they also said that and about, I think it's 56%, Helen, if I'm correct, of partner respondents say that not being able to work has negatively impacted their mental health. So the importance of partner support is clear. And the survey results clearly show that where companies engage with the whole family unit in the run-up, it's before you go on relocation, that it is really appreciated and will have long-term gains. So employers are recognizing this, but it's clear that there's still room for improvement. So more can be done, we feel, on opening the channels of communication on this issue, Eric.
Mm-hmm. Francois, so as you mentioned, your survey backs up that, including the partner is of increasingly importance. For companies who are, let's say, growing and are, expanding their footprint and, getting to that stage in the company's lifespan, if you will, how do you recommend that they focus on this and focus on ensuring that partners are able to work if they maybe hadn't even thought about it before?
Yeah. I think starting to talk with partners, talk with the whole family unit to understand the challenges that they face, and of course then adding sort of also partner support, financial support into their mobility programs, their policies. And of course there are these service providers who really give the sort of support to the family, not only the relocation support, but also more the career support. That's what I would advise for them to do. But also first to start listening to the concerns and trying to weave that into their mobility policy.
I think, yes. I think what you just said there, listening, is the key. And I think that obviously applies for a lot of aspects of our lives, but listening is of utmost importance.
Yeah. And acting, of course.
Yes.
Listening is one, and then taking it on board and trying to integrate that in their mobility policies and make it part of the assignment contract between the family and the employer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's great. So Helen, as we record this, it's almost the end of June. It is Pride Month. And so I'm curious, when we talk about partners, I think there's how do we define partners? Maybe is one way to phrase it. So I think there's of the traditional sense, But I'm wondering, has that changed in recent times? Is it purely a man and a woman married, or are more countries and employers recognizing that partners can mean LGBTQ plus, and others who maybe are not married but consider themselves partners? Just wondering, do couples need to be married?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when we started, I think there was at that time the sort of more traditional view that we're talking about a male corporate transferee and their female spouse going to the destination country. And I think that the picture now is so different, and inclusive global mobility programs need to appeal to all types of families. And so our work, we try to reflect that. And we know it matters to our sponsors. We ask within our surveys and with our wider network. So in fact, in our latest survey, we asked which family members should be included in the definition of family members who should have access to work. And it was clear from that there was support for married and non-married partners, including same-sex couples. And even broader than that, for half of respondents, there was support for work authorisation for other family members, like children of a working age. So when we carry out our advocacy, when we write to or meet with government officials, we do this sensitively, but we do emphasise that best practice is direct work access, but also we advocate for a more inclusive definition of eligible family members. And we also, from the map you see there, that's why we have the sort of more interactive features where you can see which countries are implementing more inclusive policies.
Got it. So, both Françoise and Helen, you've both been mentioning this 2022 survey. So, I'm wondering if we can dive a little bit deeper into this. You conducted this survey in 2022. Can you talk about a little bit more about the survey and the importance of international mobility and some of the benefits of international assignments in organizations?
Yeah, happy to do so. As mentioned, we did the survey in 2022, and it was aimed. One section was aimed at HR, global mobility professional, and one section at partners. And one of the questions we asked, why is international mobility so important for companies, for organizations? And the biggest asset cited by HR professionals, and I think it was almost 100%, let's say between 90 and 100%, was that international assignments facilitates transfer of knowledge, skills, and technology. Talent and leadership development are also important drivers. And I think we should not forget the sort of development of a global mindset, perspective, exposure to different cultures, business practices, and ways of thinking. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is also important. And I think last but not least, I think it boosts employee engagement and retention, which is very important these days. And ultimately, this all contributes to an organization's competitiveness, growth, and ultimately also success. So this is what HR professionals mentioned in the report as being the important drivers for international mobility.
Got it. And Françoise, what are some of the top reasons for providing dual career assistance to partners of international employees?
Yeah. I think it ultimately comes down to that where there is direct, clear, and an efficient process in place that allows partners to work in the host country, employers can better harness talent. Countries become more attractive business destinations, and I think family experience sort of improved health, well-being, and integration outcomes. And some of the data is very striking, and I want just to show how important dual career assistant is, because 26% of partners that completed the survey were considering leaving the host country due to work access restrictions. So 26% of partners. And this was also mirrored in the employer section of the survey, where in 44% of the organizations, and I'm just checking if I'm saying this correct, yes, 44% of organizations, employees had returned home early from an assignment in the past 3 years due to the concern about the partner's employment. So I think this shows clearly why this is such a key issue. And I think it's shocking when you consider the cost of a failed assignment for the employer and the impact this has on the family. So I think this really again underpins how important the dual career assistants and dual careers are in the international environment.
Mm-hmm. When you say the cost of failure,
yes,
is that a monetary cost? Like, are you able to like say, or as an organ, like say that this cost X number of dollars and it resulted in failure? Or are you saying more like holistically that it's a combination of monetary, but also maybe then the employee leaves the company because of their partner couldn't get work?
I think it's both, Eric. And we've been trying really to get a sort of, return on investment, a sort of idea of the cost. I was, referring back to to going to the archive earlier this week. I came across an article, but you have to bear in mind, I'm quoting something 23 years ago, where a CEO of a big company said that an international assignment is 4 times more expensive than a local manpower. So, and then you're not even including housing and other things. So just bear that figure in mind, and I think we can multiply that even nowadays. It is expensive, and it comes as a huge cost, monetary cost for the employer. But don't forget the impact it has on the employee and the family, and it may even result in someone leaving the company.
Got it. Helen, what are the top destinations for assignments when it comes to access for employment? I think you mentioned a few countries at the start of the show, but wondering if you can dive a little bit more into some of these countries.
Yeah. So if we're talking about where it's easiest to get work access as an accompanying partner, I think I would say then that we always point to the EU as being pretty good. That's because there are 2 overarching directives. So we've got the Intercompany Transferee Directive, the Blue Card Directive. They both allow direct work access for family members, so it's broader than just the spouse or partner. And we actually did a lot of advocacy there over many years to help bring that about. And then in the EU, in parallel, member states have their own national laws too, how they interpret the overarching directives or have their own national legislation. Some are better than others, but I think, being in the Netherlands, I have to give a shout out to the Netherlands. It's pretty good. The UK has always been good, as Françoise mentioned. Further afields, we see more and more countries just openly recognising that there is the link between partner work access and attracting the talent that is needed. So I'd say maybe Canada would be up there. And we're actually really keeping an eye on these new initiatives that are coming out to attract tech talent in Canada. But really, I would say look at the map, the world map on the website, because most of the green countries that we have on there have at least one piece of legislation that has improved the employee and the employer experience for international companies on the issue.
For sure, yes. Actually, have been trying to keep up with that Canada news as well. Came out earlier this week. I feel like they're always looking to attract. They're definitely making a lot of enhancements to their immigration and mobility system to attract immigrants and their families, and really position themselves as a welcoming destination for everyone.
Indeed.
Helen, so second part, I guess, follow up. What countries have work to do to change partner access?
Yeah. So there are a lot of countries globally where the spouse or partner doesn't get work access, didn't get direct work access, incident to their dependent status, too many to mention. I'd say probably every country has in some respects something that can be bettered, even the countries that do have legislation, say with the process, the costs, or with inclusivity. So what, as Permits Foundation, we tend to do is we focus on, say, a top 5 or 6 countries per year that matter most to our network. So right now, our 6 priority countries are the US, Singapore, China, India, South Africa, and Ireland. And that's quite a range. They're all different because some say, like the US and Ireland, we have actually on the map as green because they do have legislation that allows direct work access, but it's for certain highly skilled categories, but not all. So the US, so we were so delighted when L&E spouses got work authorization incident to dependent status. But obviously there is more to do. I mean, the US is always the top country where our network would like to see further change. So say for H4O spouses, say for non-married partners, and also just around the processing, the costs, the lengthy processes of work authorization in general. And so we're actually right now developing a new US position paper. We always welcome feedback from companies on the main issues faced. And then say Singapore, you take that country, there is a more restrictive environment now than, say, pre-2021. So previously, many spouses could access work via a fairly straightforward letter of consent route, and that's really been narrowed down. So we continue to relay our concerns there with the ministry. And then looking at India, China, and South Africa, none of those countries have direct work access at all. So achieving that would be more likely, I'd say, in India, where we have been working for many years to try to bring about work authorization for spouses of intra-company transferees. And we have a fantastic local network there. We have had a company roundtable, we've had meetings with government ministers, and our recommendation has generally been positively received. So it would be really something if we saw some movement in India. And then you contrast that, say, to China, where the ask is much more difficult. In fact, we held off a lot of our advocacy during lockdown because it just wasn't something that was feasible at the time. And now we're really just at the start of the process there. So looking to raise awareness of the issue, achieve greater clarity around the existing rights for accompanying family members. And then looking at South Africa, achieving change in South Africa would be wonderful, as there are no countries that we know of on the continent that authorise spouses to work incident to dependent status. So in South Africa, there have been some signals in recent green and white papers that this is being considered now. And we have, of course, submitted evidence to those. But then you have that against a backdrop of high unemployment. So that's a challenging environment to achieve change. And so I would say we are completely realistic with our advocacy. Change can take years. It doesn't happen overnight. But what we see is change does happen, and there is a trend for more and more countries to change the legislation.
Got it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Change can take years, can take a while. But I feel most of the time it moves. Things do change, and I think for a lot of countries, definitely for the better when it comes to mobility and allowing partners to work and families to come over and everything related. Yeah, obviously I'm in the States, so yeah, I think exactly everything you mentioned about the States. The change here is definitely very slow. We'll see what happens. But I'm glad you and the organization are advocating for additional changes and really pushing for that.
I think we've learned that we should keep on persisting and not giving up. And I think that's I think very important, Helen, that we know that we keep on knocking on doors and making the point. And even if we plant a small seed, at least it's beginning.
Yes, exactly. So, Helen, as we look to kind of wrap up our conversation today, what are some exciting developments that you're watching?
Well, I think it's really interesting to see how different governments are tackling the potential demographic challenges they know they'll face long term, further down the line, the skills gaps and shortages in certain sectors, and often that's vis-a-vis the political climate in a country, perceptions around migration, being fair to the local population. So we know that governments do recognise the link between partner employment and attracting needed skills. And so we were just talking there about Canada, and I think that's really interesting to see how they're taking a more open approach. And they've been implementing partner work access not just for the highly skilled categories, but also other categories. Then we just saw in the past few days there are other pathways opening up to attract H-1B talent from the US. And I was also just mentioning Singapore. Actually, we've seen some encouraging signs in Singapore. The One Pass for the top talent, which is now opening up that letter of consent route again for spouses to work. So we consider that a good sign. And one other country I mentioned is Ireland. In Ireland, we are really hopeful that the partners of intra-company transferees will be granted work access into student-to-dependent status. It's one of the last countries in the European region not to enable that. And we know that from employers there's a lot of tech companies there. It's really hampering their ability to bring in talent. So we actually just in the past couple of weeks sent in a big submission to the government departments in support of that recommendation. It's actually on our website if anyone's interested in that. So I'd say Ireland could be one to watch.
Those are all very, very exciting. Thank you for sharing. And I do agree that the demographic issues are, at least to me, particularly interesting in that it seems that a lot of these countries are either starting or in the midst of demographic challenges kind of at the same time. I mean, a lot of it potentially can be attributed to, at least in the States, certain generations reaching that retirement age and the economy needing to replace them with, able-bodied workers across all industries. And it seems that, as you mentioned, Helen, like countries recognize this challenge, and seemingly most of them are addressing it. But then there are a handful that are maybe moving a little bit more slow.
We won't name any names.
Yeah, exactly. Not naming names, but it's, just seeing like articles in New York Times, Bloomberg, or Wall Street Journal, and just highlighting the statistics, the demographics, and it's definitely an upcoming challenge. And if countries don't move to address it, I think then there'll be challenges on top of the challenges.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what we're talking about. Change happens eventually, and I think it's just realism. And
yes,
that's what we expect.
Exactly. And then Francois, not to give you the doom and gloom question, but obviously, Helen just mentioned some exciting developments, and I think as for all of us, whether work or personal, it's always important to also look at the potential downsides or potential issues. So Francois, I'm curious, as we continue to move out of the pandemic era, in your opinion, what are some emerging issues in addition to the demographics slice of the pie?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we asked this question in our survey, what is the impact of the pandemic and the lessons learned? And the feedback we got, and we know now that international families, so those who are potentially going on an assignment, are far more discerning about future assignments and give more consideration to the host country's healthcare system and medical facilities. Which is, of course, understandably, a survey was done at the end of the pandemic era, and this during COVID had been, an important an issue, a concern, and there's also a growing expectation of a duty of care on the part of the employer. So, in that sense, the employee and the family are expecting a little bit more from an employer, the duty of care. And apart from that, and I think that will resonate with many listeners, the pandemic has also brought a spotlight on remote working. And this won't come as a surprise. And just to quote some stats from the survey, 60% of global mobility professionals had been asked by their employees about the right of their partner to work virtually. And 30% of partners said that they would like to work remotely for an employer based in another country. We know that this remote working has always been, like self-employment, something that if you're a partner and you move from country to country, that is sort of, in a way, an easy portable skill. But many more issues are attached to this, and I won't go into that yet but we do recognize that is a significant topic for us going forward. And that we will look, at remote working more intensely, or we will research this further. And then our work is also about contributing to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't want to repeat myself, but accompanying partners are predominantly women. Though I said we see a small shift here. And as Helen said, more and more international dual career couples are not married or same sex. And where there is reduced partner access in the host country, these groups are often affected. So these are the things that we see and that we will try to sort of take forward in our advocacy. So I hope this answers your question a little bit, Eric.
It does. That's a very insightful answer, and I think the emerging issues that you highlighted will make for some good episodes in the future. So we'll need to have both of you back on to discuss your findings and recommendations.
Absolutely, we're happy to do so.
Awesome. So Helen and Françoise, I can't thank you enough for hopping on the show today. Just a couple of questions to wrap things up. Françoise, where can people find you as well as the Permits Foundation?
Yeah, as Helen mentioned, our website, www.permitsfoundation.com. Where you can also find information on the survey reports. We've been referring to that, and they are available on our website. So all the information, as a not-for-profit organization, foundation, we are very transparent. All our information can be seen on our website. So also the survey reports, it's under the heading resources. Also where at the top of a website you've got different headings, and under the heading resources you can find the survey reports we've been referring to. People can sign up for our newsletter. If someone is interested to learn more about what we're doing, Helen and I are happy to set up a call. They can contact us via our website again. And I want to highlight that we are going to organize a conference, finally again an in-person conference next year, the second quarter of 2024. And we may potentially be hosting a roundtable in the US later this year, but that's still something that needs to be decided. So, I really want to say our website is the first sort of source of information, and from there on, we are happy to connect with whoever is interested to learn more about our work.
Awesome. Well, got the website. Sounds like there might be a couple of events coming up that people can find you at, as well as additional, and the Permits Foundation. So I think with that, Françoise and Helen, it's been lovely talking with both of you today. Thank you so much for shedding more light and sharing insights on, partner work, some of the countries that are making strides to make it easier for partners to work, and, and obviously additionally highlighting countries that, where work needs to be done. So really appreciate you taking the time out today to share all these exciting details.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity to raise awareness of our work. That's great.
Definitely. All right. Well, Helen and Françoise, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.